Hi, everybody. We're going to start in just a minute or so. Thank you for being here. I know a few people will come in late. Couple housekeeping things. It's webinar style, so you can see and hear us, hopefully, with the tech things that have been going on lately. But we can just communicate with you via chat. So you'll see that little chat bubble. I'll test it for you right now. And that's where you can make comments and ask questions throughout. So we'll just test that out right now. And there you go. So we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Sandra Harris. I'm Executive Director of AWA. We have started this webinar series this year because we wanted to add another layer of things we can do for the membership. So finding topics that you all wanted to hear about, that's what we started with, and working with artists and others that are willing to share their knowledge with you. And we have a wonderful donor, Edmund S. Twining III, who has helped make that happen for us this year. So thank you for joining along. We will record this and it will be on YouTube. So if you miss anything, you'll have another chance to take a look at it. I'm thrilled today. We have Jamie Lindholm with us, who is a signature member of AWA. So she's been in a few of our exhibitions. If you haven't looked at her work, she has focused on portraiture, mainly oils. And it is so interesting, the textures and the colors that she gets. She has this interconnectedness series that I especially love. She's been painting about 30 years, according to her website. And I love on her website, she talks about observe, listen, color, and express as sort of these main themes. And what she is going to do for us today kind of feeds into that. So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
So happy to have you here. Yeah. So what Jamie has done, so as you know, this is about creativity released, the journey to your unique voice. She's going to be doing a longer workshop, like a few-day workshop on this topic coming up in Loveland, Colorado next month, I believe. But she has sort of distilled some of the main points for us. And she's been kind enough to first record a video that I'll play for you that kind of walks through some of her ideas. And you can comment during that video. When it's over, we'll come back live and we'll address your questions and chat a little bit longer. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get that video started. So enjoy. Thanks again for being here.
Welcome. Thank you. Creativity Released, a journey to your unique voice. Steve Jobs was quoted as saying, creativity is just collecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. It seemed obvious to them after a while. It's so obvious, right? Do what you love. Everyone's heard this or said it at some point. Our teachers, our mentors, even parents or friends, if you're lucky. I've even told my own students that. I mean, we know it when we see it, right? But can we define it? So a few years ago, I found myself wanting more in my work and went on an exploration. I'm going to share that with you. And maybe it will help spark a flash or spur you onto your own exploration with a little roadmap of one way to get there. The first steps of my journey started a long time ago, though. I wish I could tell you that I was born with crayons in my hands and sketchbooks at the ready, and that art was my total and only focus, but that isn't quite the whole picture. It wasn't that an art career was discouraged. It just was never even considered. My mom raised 7 kids on her own after my father died of a heart attack when I was 6. I happened to be good at math and science, so art was just never a serious thought. Engineering, accounting, mathematician, those were considerations, but not art as a career. Then, in the late 70s, I saw this painting. Dana Lova's Slipper by the late Nelson Shanks. It's a beautiful painting, right? Does it blow you away? Maybe, maybe not. But there was something about this painting. It just blew me away. I was in high school taking college prep courses, heavy in math, and I remember saying to myself, I want to paint like that. I had no idea exactly what it was about that painting. I just knew that I loved it. And I knew somewhere in the back of my mind I hadn't given up on my art. But we'll come back to this. Have you found your voice? I have a lot of friends that have, or at least I think they have. Maybe you're just starting out or wanting the next level of evolution and are just wanting more or not really sure how to find it. And you know you want to paint what you love, but what is that exactly? I mean, you may recognize many, if not all, of the images I have up here. One may even be yours. I'm so honored to know many of these artists whose work I've shamelessly cut and pasted for this presentation. And some are even good friends. I think each one expresses a voice in an amazingly unique way. So why am I here talking about this? When I saw Nelson's painting, I thought what blew me away was just his level of realism. I had no art training at the time. Sorry, Mrs. Leibowitz, one art class, but I had no real art training at the time and no vocabulary for identifying what else I loved about it. So flash forward a few years and I graduate from the university and finally felt free to focus on my art. At the time, abstract expressionism was all the buzz, and I wanted Nelson's realism. So I found my way into the studio of David Zuccherini, and my journey of learning began. And over the next 20 years, I studied, worked, and painted in Baltimore, New York City, New Jersey, Philadelphia. I even had a full circle moment when I sat in Nelson Shank's studio trying to soak in every bit of the knowledge and experience he would share. I was also teaching foundational studies at the time and had a stream of commissioned portraits. So I was busy. I was in a good space. But I was not painting my paintings, and I was rapidly tiring of painting other people's paintings. So it all changed, though, in 2017. We moved to Colorado. It was a big move, so I stopped taking commissions, closed the studio, stopped teaching, and found myself with a very large opportunity to focus on my paintings. I had lots of ideas, but no concrete way to manifest them. I didn't know how to translate them onto canvas. So, loving school and being a lifelong learner, I went back to school to get my master's. COVID was just starting. I could do it all from my own studio, and methodically, purposefully went through the process of identifying and creating my thesis. And this process is what I'm sharing. The first step is to find images that you love. No, you're not going to copy them. Not literally anyway. But no, you're not going to copy them. You are going to use them as reference though. So go Googling, clip catalogs, take photos, grab whatever you see that you love. But make sure they are images that grab you, that make your head vibrate or make your heart sing. Something that makes you feel something. Collect them, gather them, put them in a file, do it electronically, cut them out. But you're going to use them to identify in a purposeful way what it is exactly that you love about them. And once you've gathered a few dozen or so, or however many you want, you'll start to see a pattern emerge. You'll see similarities. And this is the point at where we start identifying those and documenting um, what that is. This is the actual work of the journey. So look at your collection of images. What medium are they? Do you like painting, sculpting, crafting, drawing, photography, collage, working with a chainsaw and wood? I've seen work even made from dryer lint. So only your imagination is your limit, and only you can decide. So are you pulled to a specific subject? Again, everything is available. Maybe it's historical statues. Maybe it's leafy green landscapes. Maybe it's skyscapes. Maybe it's large florals or skulls or waves. Only you get to decide this. And it doesn't have to be just one. That's the awesome thing. I mean, I tend to gravitate towards people and birds with maybe a flower or floral theme somewhere in there. And always tucked in there somewhere is the color yellow. Somehow. I can't explain it. I just love it. And speaking of color, this is a huge subject all on its own. For this webinar, though, I would say to study your file of clippings and see if there's a particular color story that repeats itself. Is there a particular hue family that stands out? Or do you like higher or lower saturation? Do you like that tonal feel? Do you want to use just a limited palette? I mean, you're going to have to do the work on this one. I mean, I spent a long time exploring color combinations and creating limited color palettes to find a combination that really resonated with me. Some others were truly interesting. In other words, they were awful, but I figured out what I didn't like too. So there's value in that. And speaking of value, do you like low-key or high-key work? Do your samples show drama or calm, or a balance of each, or somewhere in the middle? And what style are your cuttings, are your samples? I mean, I want to take a moment to point out that I realize that I've used primarily paintings and drawings in this slide deck. But this approach can be applied to any medium. If you're a sculptor, look at the various options for you. I mean, is the work in clay, marble, bronze, bas-relief, pedestal, large, small? No matter what the medium, it always comes back to what you are pulled to. And then there's composition. I mean, look at your cuttings. Do they have a single focus? Or are they Where's Waldo complicated? They might be somewhere in the middle, but you're going to see that in your cuttings. And you're going to decide whether you like simple or complex compositions. And how about pattern? I mean, are you drawn to complexity? Or maybe it's just too busy for you. Only you can decide that one. Does your collection tell a story? I mean, look at your images. Is there allegory or metaphor to communicate? Maybe it's propagandic or conceptual. Are there deeper elements to the work? Do you have something you want to say? There's a lot going on in our world, but it's your voice, your creation. So there are so many more elements and principles to consider when evaluating what you love in your work. We didn't touch on line, shape, form, space, balance, harmony, variety, rhythm, proportion, but all of them should be considered. You might not have given them a thought previously. but it's a good exercise. So getting to the end of the journey requires you to consciously use like the rubric to evaluate how you feel about them. Sometimes it's more about throwing out what you know you don't like and seeing what's left. But when you have what's left, that's where you get to put them together and play. You should absolutely love what's left though, so it should be fun to put them all together. Remember Danilova's slipper? Well, along the way, I discovered that I loved the stories of Norman Rockwell. Though I wanted to tell my stories, I had to do a lot of journaling to discover what it was I really felt compelled to say. I played with pattern to see how I could visually represent that, and did scores of color chips to find my palette combinations, and discovered. So I use these results as my recipe to create my new work. I mean, realism was always part of my regular studio practice because I wanted Nelson's realism, right? But I got very intentional when it came to my subject and my color and concept and how I was going to put this all together. And after doing all that work, I learned that my list included oil paint for painting, charcoal for drawing. I loved realistic, figurative work, and also loved birds. I want harmonious color palettes. I don't like cacophony. I like a balance of values. I like very little brushstroke, but not completely invisible. I love to tell a story, and usually it's about hope or optimism, or our interconnectedness is a big one right now. And I love a great pattern, and am patient and tenacious enough to actually sit there and be able to create that complexity, but they aren't mandatory. So I transformed from run-of-the-mill realism, in my opinion, to my unique voice. I mean, some do not like my new work. Some people don't like it. Some of my family doesn't like it. But in this process, my creativity was definitely released, and I enjoyed every moment of creating them. And if you're willing to explore this process thoroughly on your own, you'll unlock or evolve yours as well. So before we get to questions, I want to give credit where credit is due for these images, and thank this long list of artists who inspire me every day. I think their work is beautiful and so unique. So thank you. And now, can I answer any questions? And thanks for watching.
Okay, we're back live. So thank you for that video, Jamie. And I sent everybody that's watching a link where you can download a PDF. It's a great decision tree that Jamie made that kind of shows you each of those areas that you can refer back to. Thank you for doing that. And I have a couple questions. If the group is going to start off a little quiet, but put whatever questions you have in the chat. I think you might still be muted, Jamie. I just got to.
Oh, I don't know. I might have been mouthing that because I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. How's that?
I saw everybody though, didn't I?
Okay. Hopefully we're good now. Thank you, Catherine, for letting us know. Any questions you might have, go ahead and ask, but I'm going to kick one off. So when you sort of embarked on that process to look at all of these things, how long, when you showed that last slide going from sort of the before look of your work to the newer look, what kind of period of time?
Well, Though the original, what I considered run-of-the-mill realism, was probably from 1999 to 2017, really.
Okay.
And then after, not quite, Namaste, where I was starting to work out my thoughts and create ideas for my paintings. So the optimism part, anything you see of mine that has the flowered hat, is that painting's about optimism generally. And those ideas started around 2012,
Okay.
2013, but the interconnectedness and the weaving and all that was straight started 2018, 2019.
So that was
Are
a
we having a
good
sound
amount
issue?
of time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a while. It was a journey.
Well, and I love one of the things that I love in your presentation is that the one painting can just launch literally a whole direction in life, a whole type of career. And before that, were you an art lover? I know you weren't, it wasn't a major consideration for a career, but did you have a lot of exposure to art?
Well, I loved creating. I really did have my crayons and my crayon books everywhere. I mean, my coloring books. But I was also good at, I was one of her kids, my mom, the 7 kids, right? That I also played sports, and I was good at math and good at science. And I, with my 3 brothers and my 3 sisters. So yeah, I liked creating it. I loved drawing, but I can't say that I ever thought about art as a career.
Okay. Because I always find that interesting. I love to ask artists that sort of how they ended up even pursuing it, because I think it's a brave career choice in so many ways. I loved sort of hearing how it evolved. Another question that I have as I think about this, because I struggle with this all the time and sort of making decisions and finding themes. How did you at first, when you were gathering, were you thinking about filtering at all, or were you just having whatever emotional response you had and you said, I like it, and you kept it in your file?
It was, if it pulled me, like if I loved it, like just loved it, I cut it and added it to the file.
Okay.
And I figured I would just gather, and then I'll analyze them later.
That's awesome, because I think I would start sort of trying to analyze from the get-go. So that's really good advice.
Yeah, I wanted it to be spontaneous, like just pure reaction. Like,
right.
If I loved it, it was good.
and it made the cut. Yes. and obviously today that's so easy to look at digital images. Like you mentioned, you can Google, you can look at other, exhibitions online, all that sort of thing. Did you find a difference in your responses if you saw the art in person? So, was part of this like going to exhibitions or seeing installations? Was there a difference?
Not during this exercise, only because COVID had everybody when I went back to school, COVID had everybody, locked down.
Right.
But I can tell you, I have boxes down in my studio of clippings that I'd see images in magazines or catalogs, and I'd be like, nope, I'm cutting them. And one of these days I really do have to go through them because I probably don't need them anymore.
Right. And so that's so interesting that it was this collection of digital images, clipped works from magazines. And then I'm assuming since it was COVID, you weren't out taking a lot of photos, but that's something else people could do if they were out and about, I suppose. Taking photos of things that they saw.
One of the things, talking about photos, though, sorry to interrupt you. Sure. One of my frustrations earlier, before we moved to Colorado and before the onset of digital cameras, was I would see something
take a photo, and it never turned out the way I saw it, ever.
Right.
So I was like, I'm a really bad photographer. So, but with digital cameras, I could put it in Photoshop and make it look in Photoshop exactly the way my head saw it.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
And saved a lot on film.
Right. How long was it, or like how long into the gathering did you start to see some of these patterns? I know you were saying you weren't analyzing, out from the get-go, but you were gathering. Did you start seeing your own patterns pretty quickly, or did it take quite a while?
No, I mean, I'm pretty self-aware. I could tell pretty fast how, what I was attracted to in terms of at least composition and value and color. I always gravitated towards either charcoal or oil. I mean, certain criteria will pop out really fast. And then the work is in finding all the other little details, like color. Color was huge. That was a huge project.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because when I think about the artists, within AWA, and I see the works that are entered into shows, people do have after a while, very recognizable color palette, subject matter they lean toward, even textures and that sort of thing. I think my question is, having worked with artists for a while, and you even mentioned it when you sort of said some people didn't respond to your new direction. How do you deal with the desire to sort of find your voice or update your voice during your career versus, once professional artists have some level of success, your collectors get used to one sort of thing? And how do you balance pleasing people that have liked what you've always done in the past versus your new works?
I feel for those people. And I think my situation is a little unique, because when we were getting ready to move, I had pulled everything back. And with the new work, none of the old, it is a consideration, because none of the old venues really want the new work. So I have to find new venues. And I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I just had a big solo exhibition last year. So now that that's over with, I was working towards that. But now I can start concentrating on looking for new outlets. But I mean, it's definitely, you have to weigh how much do you want to be happy following your own voice, and maybe have to find new outlets or new venues or new galleries, or how much do you need the security of knowing that the existing venue is, working for you, or is it really? But
right, because we've had another session, another webinar about making money as a professional artist, which is part of the equation for most people, and thinking about how to satisfy your clientele or look for new clientele does feel like a big challenge. And I've heard people say, for this gallery, this is what they want, and have to paint that. Yeah. So, but you didn't let that stop you, obviously.
No, I mean, because it was kind of the sweet spot of being in between for me.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was a big move. I had nothing. I had a big vacuum of space and time and it's only now, a couple years later, that I would consider doing commissions again, but they would have to be in my new style. Not my old. I'm not going to go back to an old, traditional portrait, but I would do a new one, and I'm working on a few now, actually. So,
did you sort of market that in a big way, or just gradually on your website, the new works were taking over versus the old style? Or did you intentionally say, this is my new image and this is how and where I'm going to place it?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I was intentional in my marketing, but I did advertise that I was graduating with my master's and this was my thesis work. And then I just never replaced it with anything else. It's always all the new work that's coming after that is of the same interconnectedness theme.
Yeah,
So,
which I love. I mentioned at the beginning, it's a great theme. And I think as viewers, we like patterns, right? So to kind of get used to seeing that and seeing how you're going to do it a little differently each time is something I think viewers and probably collectors like also. I guess the big question is, do you continue to do this process? You know, this was sort of a project, you know, in terms of your master's program and so forth. But do you continue to gather images, and do you think you might ever have another sort of significant change?
I I think that we're always constantly evolving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I see different patterns that I like. Mm-hmm. And that's the funny thing about these paintings, is that a lot of people think they're just a pattern, like a pixelation, but they're actually two different images woven together. So I'm looking now, some of the new work that I'm kind of sketching out still weaves two different images woven together, but the patterns they're different shapes. They're not just straight, weave. So I am continuing to clip geometric shapes.
Okay.
I think I've nailed down what I like in terms of value and drama, or it depends on what I'm going to communicate. If I want to communicate peace, it's going to be calm. If I want that was one of the courses that I took that I had to work on. It was my project to see how color represents emotions or different vibrations, so to speak. So
that's really
a little woo-woo, but
no, I think that's great. Because you definitely, and there's research around that, right? If you want a room to feel calm, the walls can be a certain hue versus another. So there's science behind it. So I guess the other question as you were sort of evolving is how much experimentation. So you're gathering all these images, you're looking at them, and then I'm assuming, trying new things on the canvas at the same time. Or did you kind of get through a whole process of these different themes and then go to the canvas? How did that interplay with the gathering of your inspiration?
Interestingly enough, I gathered all my information, and instead of throwing them up on the canvas, I worked them all in Photoshop first. Rearranging or Illustrator, I'd put them all together. Because it's so much easier to change backgrounds or, change tone or value or saturation. You can change all of that so quickly in Photoshop. But I would take all my sketches and all my images and work it all out in Photoshop. And then I'd be like, that's it, that's what I want. And then I would create I would go to the canvas, because these paintings are extremely detailed and they take forever to paint. Much slower process than my old work. Yeah. Sometimes I get a little frustrated too, because I'm like, I'd like to work a little faster. So I'm working on that too, how I can speed up my process. And
I imagine that plays into if you're a professional and you're selling with galleries or elsewhere, you know, that speed changing drastically can change how quickly you can get new works to folks. And I'm assuming your price structure has to, you know, account for that too. So that's really interesting that it's not just changing a style per se, it's kind of changing the whole way you're operating your business in some ways.
Very, very, very much so.
Okay.
I almost feel like a completely different artist, you know,
Interesting.
because it's a new market, it's they're new paintings, it's a new message or whatever, you know. Yeah, but I am working on speeding them up because I'd like to complete a lot more work
Right.
in a year than I have been. So we will see. But I do know artists that only create 4, 5, 6 paintings a year.
Yeah.
But they're way above my pay grade, so I don't know. Maybe
You know,
I should raise my prices more.
that gets talked about, you know, in other scenarios when you're changing something and you have to do, I mean, it's the whole economic piece is part of it. If you're a professional artist and it's not, you know, if you're doing it as a hobby, that's different. But for those of you that are doing it as a career, it's a whole different consideration. It's really interesting to me. I'm looking at your chart that I gave everybody. And, you know, you talk about medium, style, composition, subject, color, story. Were any of them more clear to you out of the gate? And did you have more debates about others, or did they all just kind of, did your voice rise through all of them pretty equally?
No, I realize I have my headset on, so I'm probably getting a little lag. But I've always been attracted to beauty and kindness. But as far as my voice, one of the courses I took, one of the moderators for the course at the university was is an art therapist. So part of analyzing what I wanted to say with my work was to do that journaling. And I mean, if you have followed the Artist's Way, you could do morning pages. But this was really about putting an idea of what I wanted to communicate. Because like in the slide presentation, I had all these ideas. And I didn't know how to visually communicate those. So I would do a lot of journaling. And then she'd have me go back and do another level and then do another level. So it was another evolution of pulling more information out. And then how could you represent that? You know, right. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, it absolutely did. And I'm just trying to put myself, you know, I'm not an artist, but I'm a decision maker. So I like anything that sort of helps you find your voice in decision making and sort of sort through influences. In fact, in the fall at the museum show that we're having in Loveland, our symposium this year is talking all about this, finding your voice and finding your unique path, your unique career path. Do you apply, this is just a personal question, do you apply this kind of thinking to any other area of your life? Like, you know, thinking about things you like? Because I think that we all are just so bombarded with so many options of things to do, things to spend our time on, things to acquire, you know, that sort of thing. And at least in my case, it can feel overwhelming to have so many choices. Do you think you could apply this kind of thing, this kind of decision making to other areas?
Oh, that's a very good question.
That's a non-artist brain asking.
Yeah. And here's what I think. If I were 28 again, when I didn't know anything but thought I knew everything,
right?
I probably wouldn't have applied it. But now, you know, in my 60s, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. I know immediately what I want to do and what I don't want to do.
Right.
But oh, that's interesting. That's a very interesting question.
I just think, and especially today, at least having lived through all these changes with the access to information and images that we didn't have when I was younger, to me at least, it can feel there's so many options and so many things to think about. I like this, and maybe other people don't need that, but I like this sort of have a map, have a plan to figure out and narrow choices down. Anyway, that just crossed my mind. Because I think
that was a great question.
Well,
I do find myself seeing different forms of artwork, and I'm like, oh, that looks like so much fun. Maybe I'd like to try that. And I'm like, I don't have time to try that.
Right.
But,
right.
Yeah.
Yes. And that then you have to make choices. And maybe that's my other sort of last question. We have a very quiet group today. Maybe they're just liking our questions. But did you struggle at all with the letting go of things that sort of didn't make the cut? Because I think that can be a challenge too, when you're making decisions, finding your voice, finding your way, sort of, am I making the right decision? Am I going to regret? And I have to let this part go or this style go. Did you struggle at all with that? Or did this process make that easier once you got there?
Well, I found that the way I make decisions, the way change happens in my life, is that I think about it until it becomes more painful to stay where I am than it is to just move,
right.
Just evolve and just do it.
Right.
And then I think, well, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? Well, the worst thing is that absolutely nobody likes the work and nobody buys it but did I still enjoy painting it? Yeah, I loved it. And I know that there's a market for everything. I'll find it, But I've never been afraid of change. Never. I mean, I've moved. I grew up in Ohio. I've lived in Michigan and Maryland, New York, New Jersey, now Colorado. So, and it could wonder where the next place might be, but that's not been me. I'm a kind of a free bird. I would, I'm off for the adventure. Let me try it.
Right.
So,
well, and I think for people that aren't as prone, maybe something like this would help them because they can say, I've done my due diligence. I've really thought about it. I've really analyzed it. And I've found a way to just go. And I think that's the last piece of it. You gather all of this, you find your patterns, you find that voice that you want to explore, and then finally just that, okay, and go, right? So like you said, taking it to the new way of doing things.
Yeah. I mean, at least it will give you an opportunity to play, to have some fun. I mean, at least explore it, because like I said, if you've pulled everything that you love, how could you not have fun creating that? I mean, I remember when I finished the very first painting and I was like, I got excited. I was like, I love this. And yeah.
Did you ask anybody else for feedback, or was this all you and your voice?
100% me.
Okay.
And because I've learned with my husband and my son, well, especially my son, he's 19 now, but at the time, I can't ask them, because he's very honest. No, I don't like that one, and I'm like, okay, but I do. So,
right. Well, I think that's a great point, because we've heard various artists talk in other ways about, do you approach it, fully with your voice, your optimism, your confidence, and then others really rely on and want, like an artist critique group. There's going to be a webinar later about that, where they run it by people that they trust and how challenging that can be. And I can see pros and cons on both sides, right? Because if you've done all this work and your gut is you're correct in what you want to do, having somebody come in that didn't go through all that with you, and then say, maybe not. I mean, you want to hear it, but Do you? I don't know. I think that's fascinating.
That's a good point, and I think you might. It might be my influence of being one of 7 that
Right.
I don't want to hear. I don't want to know.
You had
No.
voices in your ears at all times, whether you wanted them or not. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and again, the theme is finding your voice, and that is the difficulty. How do you wade through all the influences and all the possibilities and find the confidence to do what you want? And as an artist, I just love this advice and sort of breaking it down into those different areas to just look for and not to think first, just gather. I love that. Don't analyze it, and patterns will emerge. I would love to know before we wrap up, we have such a quiet group today. Now's your chance if you have any last minute questions, but I would like to hear just a little bit about this extended workshop that you're doing and sort of what those elements are. And if, I'm assuming people could still register if they're in Colorado.
They can. And I've been pretty quiet in advertising it only because it seems like my whole life of activities have taken place in March and April.
Right.
But I'm blessed that they even took the opportunity to let me present it because it's brand new. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a working experience. But literally, we're going to go through the first day. And this is a 3-day workshop up there. And I don't actually know how we're going to get everything done in 3 days.
Wow.
But we're going to limit it. And the first day is going to be going through. They're going to have homework before they get there. They don't know it yet. Mm-hmm. But to pull all their images, whatever. And the first day, we're going to go through the major elements and aspects of how they identify what they love in their work. Mm-hmm. And the second day, we're going to work on color palettes. And, little thumbnails. Really, at least the half a day, we're going to work on color to nail it down to. And for this workshop, I'm just going to have them do a limited palette, mm-hmm. but because they can make that as dramatic or as, calm as they want. Mm-hmm. And then depending on their subject matter, because they can paint whatever they want or create whatever they want. It's not even painting. It can be drawing. It can be mixed media. It can be, and their medium of their choice.
Okay.
The third day, we're actually going to try to take all those elements that they pulled and create a small work.
Okay.
And probably like the second half of the second day and the third day. So this is why I don't think it's going to be a very packed workshop.
Right. So condensing all those steps that you took quite a long time into just a quick model of how to go from gathering images, playing with color, and then trying out a new way to do work. But I think that's a nice kickstart.
Yeah. I will have the rubric, so they mm-hmm. will be choosing each item, and then we're going to put them all in one circle. Mm-hmm. And it is a very methodical process to begin with. And a lot of artists don't like that. They want to be spontaneous, or especially if you're an abstract expressionist. Okay. But you can still choose color palettes and,
shapes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's a taste. It's meant to be a taste for trying, the exercises to finding your voice.
And I think for people that like an in-person workshop, which some people still really thrive in that environment, that, interacting with other people and, a little bit of that, oh, that's great, good for you, is something that some people really do love. Would you ever do that online, the long version, or do you think in person is more important?
As a matter of fact, I'm kind of planning on a longer version. And then if I was going to practice on people online first, unless I can get, somebody that wants me to do a longer workshop.
Right.
But this is brand new, and I haven't taught a workshop since we moved here. So it's been a few years. But I know the subject matter very well, so I should be okay. So.
And I'm glad we could be a small test case, because I do think this is the kind of thing that could work online, particularly because people are gathering their images and trying things out. So I think it could resonate that way. So if we don't have other questions, is there anything else I've left out that you want to be sure that we want to say about your great process for finding a new voice or defining your current voice?
I just want to thank you for having me. It was, I think we've covered,
Okay.
I'm thinking, I don't think we've missed anything.
Awesome.
But somewhere along the way, there's something, or an image just like Nelson Shank's Dana Lover's Flipper,
Right.
which is not one of his most famous paintings, but somewhere along the way, people get attracted to something. And there's a little seed of hope in that. So
Right.
thank you. No, and I'm available. If anybody has a question after
Okay.
this, please just email me or text me or whatever.
Yeah, I put the link to your website in the chat, so they can find you that way too. Well, I can't thank you enough. It was wonderful. And thanks everybody who came. I hope you got something to inspire you on your own journey for finding your voice and your own creativity. So thank you all. And I hope you'll join us next month. We're doing another version of the gallery artist relationship with a longtime gallery owner, Cheryl Newby, that many of you know. And then we're going to have one of our vendors, Windsor Newton, doing a demo, and they'll have some little giveaways for the people that come to the live. So watch the newsletter, and we'll have more coming. And thank you again. Thanks for everybody that was here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.